Greetings and welcome back to Gadfly Academy. We will be continuing our consideration of attention, habits, and in particular this week on values. As I mentioned last week, before looking at what our goals should be to regain control over our attention, we first need to consider some of the most basic human questions. Basic, but questions that are often not enough considered. Questions like, who am I? What do I value? What do I want? If we are to reclaim control over our attention, we need to understand what it is that we value and want out of life. One of the reasons that there's been this technology creep is that we lack clarity. The technology comes with certain bonuses, positives, and we take those, and then we don't consider the side effects, the downstream side effects. So only once we've clarified our values can we look clearly at the modern world to properly discern what the problem is and why this is a problem. This is the other big issue, is if we don't have clarity in our values, then how do we judge why something is bad or good? We might have an intuition that there's a problem with it, but it's harder to clarify what the problem is if we don't have a sense of a kind of a hierarchy of our values. So following on that idea of technology creep, I do want to make these installments as practical as possible and to not get too lost in the weeds. There are some basic ideas that will help to clarify what the problem is, however, so we can have a better idea of what we can do to counteract it. So I would say the short version is that the loss of attention in the modern world can largely be traced back to a kind of technology creep. In the 1960s, Neil Postman coined the term media ecology as a way to describe how new technologies enter society in much the same way as an invasive species enters a new ecosystem. The process is slow but steady, as the new technology gets more and more deeply enmeshed in every aspect of society. Postman's book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, documents the process of television's capture of American and eventually of world culture. And if you were not following earlier our book study of that book, you can find a link to the Amusing Ourselves to Death playlist below this video, where you can go through our book study. It's a very important book, I think, for understanding how we got to where we are. So I mentioned this technology creep because for most of us, new technologies are adopted as if through osmosis. We find ourselves surrounded by them, and rather than resist them, which is often the response of, for example, the Amish, we do what everyone else is doing, which is simply to accommodate ourselves to them. This process is not, certainly, as I mentioned above, without its benefits, which is why new technologies tend to be successfully adopted. They offer us something attractive. The problem, of course, is that when we accept them, we usually, again, do not consider the possible downstream effects of a technology, the hidden negative consequences that usually go unnoticed and unappreciated. So, as I mentioned earlier, the problem with this technology creep is that it results in us accommodating ourselves to the new technologies. As Postman and many others have pointed out, all technologies have their own set and hierarchy of values. To take one example, the telephone, for example, prioritizes speed, efficiency, and the disincarnate spoken word over physical presence, body language, and the incarnate spoken word. A good question one might ask oneself is, which do I prioritize? Do I prefer being with someone in person, or do I prefer speaking with them over the phone? This issue obviously gets a little bit more complicated because since the telephone was invented, it actually created a whole new set of conversation types, which were not possible before it existed. So, for example, you would have a conversation with someone about something because you have the convenience of picking up the phone and having that conversation. You wouldn't necessarily go over to the person's house to have that conversation. So this is a related but different conversation issue. So not to get into the weeds too deeply. These new conversation types are one example of the changes wrought by the new technology of the telephone. So again, to try not get into the weeds too much, it does help to focus on our value system and to achieve clarity in that. So to that end, I'm going to suggest that we take some time to do some journaling. Journaling is something that I found very helpful in having a bit of a conversation with myself, going deeper, giving myself this time and the space and the location to get ideas out. And I find it helps often bring about clarity. So I'm going to suggest some writing prompts, journaling prompts. I will include them in the description below. I'll go ahead and offer them to you here as well. And just you might want to choose a few of them. You can just choose just one, whichever ones you find most helpful, inspiring. The main goal just being to begin to work on getting some clarity into our values. So one, if you had to describe yourself in 3 words, what would they be and why? 2, what are some of your favorite memories? What made them memorable? 3, what do you enjoy doing when no one is watching? 4, what are the things that bring you the most joy? 5, what values are most important to you? And then a kind of continuation of that one, what actions in your daily life reflect these values, and where might you be out of alignment? What qualities in others do you admire, and do you see them in yourself? 7, what personal goals or aspirations do you have, short-term and long-term? 8, what would you pursue if you knew you couldn't fail? And 9, what does a meaningful or successful life look like to you on your own terms? So hopefully that exercise will help clarify a little bit your values. We will be going more deeply into this question. So if you have that exercise done, the next installment next week will hopefully help go even more deeply into what I'm referring to as human values, as opposed to non-human values. And that's finding the language to speak about these things, I think, is going to be really helpful. But that's it for today. I did want to ask if you're comfortable to please share any insights you had during the journaling process. Are there other questions, topics that you would be helpful to explore in this process? Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, if you'd like to watch our other videos on attention, please click on the playlist with all the videos in the upper right of the screen right now. If you haven't already, please download the How Did We Get Here reading list, join our newsletter. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.